Good afternoon. I'm James Victor, and this is Urban Sprawl, or more specifically, the greatest harm to sports communities and physical activity in the United States. Now, what is sprawl? You might have heard of it, you might not have heard of it. It's basically a very specific reaction a city can take to a massive influx of immigration, right? The major trend in the United States right now is that people are moving out of states like California, Illinois, and New York, and moving down south into states like Arizona, Texas, Georgia, Florida, and Tennessee. And city planners really don't see much of a problem with this. It actually started in the Industrial Revolution when the need arose to separate housing from business, because it's very easy to plan around, as you can tell, but there are some problems with this. Looking at a place like Detroit, Michigan, which is a very gridded city, right? You can see everything's on a city block if it's not on the river directly. And this allows for very easy transportation, minimal traffic, and a large diversity of buildings to be put anywhere. But if you look at a place like Phoenix, Arizona, which is where a lot of these communities are now starting to sprawl up, is where you might find a lot more organic shapes. You can see it almost looks something like a fingerprint, and you'd be correct in that association because, like a fingerprint, these aren't really planned out. City developers just buy them and fill them as quickly as possible. You can see the same thing happening here in Nashville, Tennessee, in communities like Antioch and Fairview, although to a lesser extent because we're a bit behind. So what's the problem with this exactly? It's ugly, but what's the problem, right? I like to look at Bill Bemberger's Hoops. We've all seen it. It's an exhibition about basketball hoops around America. It goes from the rural back streets of Tennessee to the urban blacktops of New York City. But one place it doesn't show is the suburban basketball community. And I'd like to think that this is not a coincidence, but on purpose, because many of these communities, this is an excerpt from a community here in Nashville, actually prohibit almost all of these recreational activities from happening unless brought forth on a specific occasion to get specifically approved. I forgot what the next slide is. Yes, and this isn't just happening here in Nashville. The same developers that are working in Nashville are simultaneously working all across the South. As you can see, the prospect of making a new furbished living space is more important to these city developers than having a space that looks lived in, as is apparent by lawn care services rather than doing it yourself, and sidewalks that just don't go anywhere. A great example of this can be seen in Phoenix, Arizona, which is a lot more developed on this sprawl than we are. You can see their population surpassed 5 million in about 2000, and their football and basketball teams, respectively, have been pretty shaky, both suffering very humiliating defeats in 2018. But you can see, since then, they've started springing right up. Well, why is that? It's because of T2050, also called Transportation 2050, because of the transportation opportunities that it allows. As you can see, it offers over 1,000 miles of bike lanes, as well as over 130 miles of sidewalks. Sidewalks, I might add, that actually go places. One major drawback from this, and this is why not everybody has used this in their sprawled cities, is that it does cost quite a bit. For example, T2050 actually required 5 different sources of funding, be it taxes, state funds, federal funds, personal contracts, and business contracts. But this is a very expensive mistake that needs to be fixed at any cost. The people of Phoenix, Arizona, and the people of all of these suburban communities really deserve the home that they paid for, not the house that they're getting. These communities need to be communities, and suburban sprawl stands directly in the way of that. There's a direct correlation between there's a direct correlation between the attitude of a city and how well its sports teams do. Because as George Orwell put it, the significant thing is not the behavior of the players, but the attitude of the spectators.
information did you need before you began your research? And then how did that initial information shape where your research went to?
Well, I started out with looking at what things prohibited sports in America, right? The whole prompt was about sports, and I had to branch off of that. And it just so happened that architecture was one of those things, and I love architecture because I'm white. So, yeah, I kind of branched out from there, and I found some really interesting things with Phoenix, Arizona, and to a lesser extent, of course, here.
Okay. And then second question, if you had more time, what additional research would you conduct related to this issue?
I think I would look for more solutions. I was talking about how expensive the solution in Phoenix was, and this is happening a lot of places. And while I couldn't find any other solutions, or at least viable solutions, I think I would look for more in general, because less money is good in sense of cost.